Okay. Good morning from Paris. Good afternoon for Tokyo. We would like to start today's Reality Brown Bag Lunch seminar. My name is Aki Tamura, Senior Advisor for Reality and the Director General of JETRO Paris. I'm going to serve as a moderator of this seminar. Today, we are truly honored to welcome a good friend of mine, Dr. Céline Pajon. She is Research Fellow and Head of Japan and Indo-Pacific Research at the Center for Asian Studies of the French Institute of International Relations, so-called IFRI. Céline is one of the most famous so-called Japan hands in France, as you can see on her bio. For example, Céline is also a visiting researcher of Canon Institute for Global Studies. So some of the audience today may already know her very well. Today, Céline will deliver a lecture titled France's Evolving Indo-Pacific Strategy, Priorities, Challenges, and Adaptation. Her lecture is particularly timely and pertinent given the fact that Mr. Emmanuel Macron, the President of France, will pay his state visit to Japan from March 31st until April 2nd. Moreover, France is serving as a G7 host country for this year. As all of you know, France has been traditionally an important player in the Indo-Pacific region because of its vast overseas territories, including New Caledonia. However, on top of that, because of the recent geopolitical and geoeconomical sea change in the region and globally, France has reinforced its engagement in this region, militarily and in other domains. As you can observe in, for instance, La Mission Clemenceau 25. It also seems that France has been adjusting its positions to this region, as we can observe in, for instance, President Macron's speech at the Shangri-La Dialogue last year. Of course, it means that France has encountered new challenges as well. Obviously, Japan should collaborate and cooperate with France effectively for the peace and the stability of this region. However, unlike our understanding to the United States, which is Japan's closest ally, our understanding to France, particularly to its strategic interest in this region and diplomatic goal, is quite limited. Moreover, France is a part of the Europe and a major member state of the EU. So when we consider how to work with France, we also must bear in mind the dynamics of the European political economic system as well. It is my strong hope that today's lecture will help deepen our understanding to these issues. First, Céline will deliver her presentation for around 40 minutes. Afterwards, I will make a brief comment, and then the floor will be open to the audience for questions. We are going to end the seminar at 5 p.m. in Tokyo time. Having made my introduction, I would like to give the floor to Céline. Céline, the floor is yours.
Tamura-san, thank you very much for your very kind introductions. Actually, we are both in Paris, not in the same room, but experiencing an early morning. So thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really, really delighted to be able to address such a distinguished audience. And indeed, I think the seminar is really timely with President Macron upcoming visit. I think there will be a lot of new announcement and to show that the Franco-Japanese partnership is dynamic, is fruitful, and is more and more strategic, as you explained in the current world order. So I will share my screen to show you my slide, so that you can better follow my presentation. Here we are. Yeah. So here we are. So indeed, my presentation today will focus on France's evolving Indo-Pacific strategies. I'll do my best to explain why France is interested in the Indo-Pacific. Actually, France was the first European country to adopt an Indo-Pacific strategy. The strategy per se was adopted in 2019, but the liminal to fundamental speech, I would say, is this one by President Macron at the Garden Island naval base in Sydney, and it was in 2018. So, and in this Indo-Pacific strategy, from the beginning, Japan has been identified as a key strategic partner for France. So very quickly, the outline of my presentation, why an Indo-Pacific strategy, why France cares about the region. Then I will explain about the modalities of this strategy, the assets and the limits, and I will end with a focus on France-Japan partnership. So as Tamula-san referred to, France is a resident nation of the Indo-Pacific. We do have overseas territory across Indian and Pacific Ocean. On this map, you can see the various diplomatic presence of France. You have the embassy, but you have also the French territories there. And the territories themselves, the islands may be small, but at least, but actually they are commanding, they are controlling a very large exclusive economic zone, EEZ. So France EEZ is the second largest in the world, and 90% of the EEZ is actually in the Indo-Pacific. So it means that we have a large presence, actually, but also a large responsibility to protect these territories. There is 1.6 million French citizens living on this territory right now. We have 200,000 French citizens living in other countries in the region. And to protect this territory, we have sovereignty forces. And you can see on this map, so we have military forces that are prepositioned in La Réunion, in the Indian Ocean, in the New Caledonia, and French Polynesia in the Pacific. So altogether, approximately 7,000 troops, about 12 vessels, 40 aircraft that are permanently deployed to the region. And I should add that France is the only European nation that has this permanent military forces in the region. Just going back to this map, just to mention that France's geographic definition of the Indo-Pacific is very broad. It's encompassing the eastern coast of Africa, as you can see, all the way to the Pacific. And this is not the case of all actors of all countries having an Indo-Pacific strategy, but it's actually the case of Japan. So we do share also this broad vision, this broad definition of what is Indo-Pacific strategy. And that means also that we are able to work together, to cooperate together from Djibouti, from the east coast of Africa to the South Pacific. So yeah, sovereign territories is one key fundamental interest for France. But of course, we see Indo-Pacific now as a new center of the world that's combining a lot of economic growth. We have economic interdependence, but the region is also home to lots of security and strategic risk and threats. So this is raising a lot of stakes for us. So Indo-Pacific as the engine of global growth, as you know, home of 60% of global GDP, some of the world's fastest growing middle classes, home to key maritime corridors, 50% of the world container traffic, 70% of energy raw materials that transiting through the Indian Ocean. And I think what we see now with the crisis in the Middle East and the fact that the Strait of Hormuz is now closed, exemplified the interdependence and the vital, actually, role of the sea lane of communications that are running from the Middle East and Europe to the Indo-Pacific. So interdependence is growing. 40% of European Union trade goes through the South China Sea. For France, it's about between 15 and 20% of its global imports and exports to the Indo-Pacific. And I should also add that, of course, the region is a key provider of semiconductor for Europe and France. So approximately 60% of the European dependence on Taiwan semiconductor production. And when it comes to advanced chips, there is a critical dependency. So that means that for trade reasons, Indo-Pacific is very important, of course, and for global value chain, it's absolutely critical. But as you know, the region is also home to a very threatening security environment, and we see a variety of threats and risk. Looking from France, what we see is first a Chinese growing assertiveness in the East and South China Sea, and even further away. So we see the maritime expansion of China challenging the law of the sea. We know that around the Senkaku Islands, there is a kind of harassment by the Chinese Coast Guard with repeated violation and incursion into Japanese water. In the South China Sea, China has claims on more than 80% of the area, and has been reclaimed some islands, build up some military base on that, and there's repeated friction with its neighbor, which is quite concerning also for France, as it put at risk the fundamental principle of freedom of navigation in the region. One also wake-up call for France was back in 2017 when China set up a military base in Djibouti. As you know, Djibouti is a key stronghold for France in the region. Taiwan Strait, of course, is a key concern, not only for the government and for the issue of rule of law, but also for our companies and private sector, banking sector, and so on, who is actually really closely following what's going on. We've seen this growing tensions and frictions in recent years. There were talk about a kind of a window of risk for a China kinetic action on Taiwan in the next few years. But we know that hybrid warfare is also already underway, which is also destabilizing. North Korean nuclear and ballistic program, also very destabilizing factor, with the fact that the rapprochement with Russia and the Security Pact is raising more concern regarding an acceleration of the nuclear program of DPRK, but also the fact that the North Korean soldiers are now fighting on European soil with Russia is concerning for both Europeans and an Asian player. It means that they will have this kind of war experience, and so will pose greater threats in the region as well. Very quickly, South Asia is also under risk, with Afghanistan-Pakistan conflict underway, even though we tend to not looking at it very closely because all the attention is set on the Middle East and almost straight right now. India-Pakistan frictions are regular too. And Northwestern Indian Ocean, I don't need to elaborate too much on it because it's an everyday concern for everybody right now. So you can see on this map basically what I explained about the security issues. Just to add that it's not only interstate issues, so-called traditional security issues. There is also like non-traditional, like maritime security, pressure on fishery resources, IUU fishing, crimes at sea, piracy, narco-traffic is more and more concerning. Environmental security is also very much concern for France, because climate change and its effect is actually the #1 security threats for Pacific Island countries and many other nations, islands. And there is also growing demand for HADR post-disaster relief operation. Hybrid and common threat, we all are facing that. So as a key takeaways, as I explained, any crisis in the Indo-Pacific would severely impact the maritime transportation, energy supply, digital infrastructure, and it will pose a huge challenge for France and Europe. So France interest in the Indo-Pacific is not only about economy and its own territory, but is also a kind of what we call power interest. France is a permanent UN Security Council member, and so as such, it pursues an active contribution to strategic stability in the hotspot zone. It's also pursuing the counter-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. So France has been a key player also to monitor the UN sanction on North Korea, for example, in latest year, and a strong concern to uphold international law, especially the law of the sea. And I will provide some example afterwards. So as you could see, as you could get from my presentation, right, so far, 3 objectives of France strategy in the Indo-Pacific. First of all, to protect our sovereign interest, the territories, nationals in the region, easy. Second, to reduce instability risk, both from interstate tensions and transnational threats. And third, and maybe that's related also to France, a specific international posture, so to say, to try to influence the regional balance, strategic balance, and provide additional option. I wouldn't say third way, but we will discuss that later, between the US and China, or at least a kind of balancing power. So France strategy is organized around three broad principles: independent and inclusive. From the beginning, France has distinguished its approach from the US-led Indo-Pacific strategy, as it is no explicit containment of China. So France is actually insisting on having this kind of inclusive approach, of course, upholding a open, multilateral, rules-based approach, but that can include Beijing when and where possible, with the conditions that the common principles are actually agreed. So the common principles, so it's a principle-based strategy. Again, a rules-based order is the key. And for this, actually, since 2014, France has been sending its military vessels in the region and through the South China Sea annually to actually assert the law of the sea. So we are patrolling constantly the South China Sea to push back on claims that are excessive. And you could see even the deployment of the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle and the group around Charles de Gaulle to the Pacific last year. So it also patrolled South China Sea, and it went all the way to the eastern part of the Philippines in the Pacific. Third principle, it's partnership-based approach. Even though we have some permanent presence in the region, we know that we have still limited resources, so we rely on our strategic partners in the region, and our priority partners, which is India, Japan, Australia, US, and increasingly also Southeast Asian nation, Singapore, Indonesia, Philippines. We've seen our partnership growing in recent years. This partnership is supported by defense equipment sales, especially with India, Indonesia also in recent years, and capacity building cooperation, mostly focused on maritime security. And just to mention that European nations are also our partner in the Indo-Pacific. The EU has its own Indo-Pacific strategy, and we see the deployment of Germany, Italy, and other European countries to the Indo-Pacific, and we try to articulate our strategy with them. So three principles and four domains where France is acting in the Indo-Pacific. The pillar one is security and defense, and I refer to it. That might be the most remarkable and most known pillar of France strategy in the region. But we are also active in economy, connectivity, and innovation, so trade promotions. We see we are also active in the undersea cables project. We set up some kind of R&D partnership, also for sustainable development and connectivity infrastructure. And all this is also made in coordination with the EU initiatives in the region, especially the Global Gateway Initiative, which is providing a lot of funding for infrastructure. The pillar 3 is multilateralism and the rule of law. Again, we are very keen to sustain existing regional organizations such as ASEAN, Pacific Island Forum, but also broadly UN institution, and I think it's distinguished feature now than the US is actually challenging this part. And the pillar 4 is climate, biodiversity, ocean governance, which derive also from the fact that we have our overseas territories that are facing significant challenges on this topic. So now I will look at what are what can we consider as the assets and challenges and limitations of France's approach in the Indo-Pacific. The first asset I explained already, the regional presence and the fact that we have preposition forces. I think this is quite original for European nations, and it helps also to be legitimate. Our military forces in the regions are actually participating to regional mechanism for maritime surveillance, for example, in the Pacific Islands nations, and HADR operations. So they are well known, they are well appreciated. So I believe this is a key asset for France. The second asset, I would say, is the multiple military deployments that we are able to make in the region. Again, not all the European nations have the capacity to deploy in the region. So this is some kind of deployment that we made, just to say that it's actually growing in latest years. So with the Charles de Gaulle carrier group last year, but we had also nuclear attack submarines that have been deployed to the region, and high-end first-class frigates also deploying annually. When we deploy to the region, we also hold some exercise with our partners, of course, including Japan. So it's a very key for interoperability with our partners. And I can show you this map. So this map is just illustrating the Mission Clemenceau last year of the aircraft carrier group with several exercises. So Pacific Stellar in particular was held in the Pacific with Japan and the US. And you can see La Pérouse was more multilateral, multinational exercise. But this is key. And again, there is a European dimension to this deployment, because when we deploy, we're trying also to work with Italian, with British, with people from the Netherlands when they send a ship to the region. A third asset for France, I believe, is its strategic partnerships. So our key partners, first I would list India, because of the very strong defense industrial cooperation also that we have with India, which is really structuring the partnership. With Japan, and I will go more in details afterwards. Japan has been a key partner because it has this also focus on maritime security that we share, and there's a lot of, and Japan is a capable partner as well. Australia has been an important partner despite AUKUS, which was a big shock. The partnership has been resumed in recent years, and Australia is actually our neighbor in the Pacific. So there is still this operational cooperation that's going on with Australia. United States, of course, it's a key ally, be it in the Euro-Atlantic theater and also in the Indo-Pacific. I referred afterwards about the balancing power posture of the France, but still operationally, US is key partner. Other partners include Singapore, Indonesia, as I mentioned, Philippines, and European partners. Now, would like to turn to the challenges and limitation and maybe more complications. And talk first about the diplomatic posture of France that can be found a bit ambiguous because there's been a lot of terminology, especially the President Macron has been talking about France being a balancing power in the region or providing a third way. And this concept are quite confusing and frequently misunderstood. So it seems when you talk about balancing power that we are quite equidistant from the US and China, but it's also actually not the case at all. Of course, US is a key and a long-term ally of France. So China is more and more seen as a competitor and a rival. So what we mean by third way is that we are kind of rejecting this kind of block-to-block confrontation and rivalry that we think is quite destabilizing as well. So we want to try to provide an alternative. Not choosing from one to other, but provide an alternative. So we say that we are allied with the United States, but we are not always aligned. So that means that France would like to be able to autonomously decide for its own interest, and when it considers that its interest is not completely aligned with the US, for example, to be able to act in its own way, to keep a kind of margin of maneuver. The insufficient military means, so this is a recurring critique and discussion in France, saying that we have a lot of ambition in the Indo-Pacific, but the Indo-Pacific is very wide, and our military means, even though we have this presence, are limited. And there is also this tyrannous distance, and I can show you this map. I'm sorry, it's in French, but you can easily understand how long it takes if we want to deploy assets from mainland France, so to say, from Toulon, from Brest, to the region, to Singapore, to the South China Sea. So that takes a lot of days of sea. So that's a huge effort. So that's to say that, of course, we do not ambition to act and have the kind of same military power than the country of the region, or even the US or China. But our forces have been modernized in recent years. We are upgrading their capacity to be able to be better partners also in the region. And the third challenge, I call that a crisis of credibility. We've had experienced tensions and complicated situations related to France's colonial past in the region, especially we've seen independence movement gaining momentum in New Caledonia. As you know, that it actually degraded into violent upsurge in 2024. We've seen some independent movement also in French Polynesia. And this is important vulnerability because it's providing a way for external players for interference and influence to undermine the French presence and legitimacy in the region. Especially, we've seen some very active operation by Azerbaijan, but also China is quite active to reach out to the independence movement and also to make some influence in the UN regarding the French territories. I already talked a little bit about the AUKUS shock, which was a brutal loss for Japan, France defense export and a crisis of confidence, but actually it was later on surmounted, and with Australia the relation is doing better now. With all that challenge, it raised several questions about how France could actually keep a sustainable presence and influence in the Indo-Pacific. And we've seen actually an updated strategy that was published in July last year. And providing a more realistic, I would say, pragmatic approach to the region, putting the French interest first, so sovereignty first. Overseas territories are front and center for this strategy, with an emphasis placed on the consultation, cooperation, and local ownership by our overseas territory of this Indo-Pacific strategy. That was not the case for the first one. It was mostly designed in Paris and imposed on our overseas territories. We see a more multidimensional engagement. So the strategy expands beyond the well-known security dimension to include a more economic, climate, technological cooperation, with some appeal to the private sector, also to engage more proactively in the region. The balancing stance of France is continued. We still promote this concept of strategic autonomy, even though, of course, we stay within the alliance with the United States. And at the same time, which is quite remarkable on this new strategy, is that there is more explicit criticism of China action and ambition in the region. So there are several mentions, for example, of Taiwan and the Taiwan Strait and the importance of the stability of the Taiwan Strait. This was not the case, again, in the first strategy. The partnerships also are at the core of the strategy, because we know we have limited resources again. So we double down on the cooperation with our regional partners. And in this strategy, there is a stronger European dimensions. We aligned our approach with the EU to leverage economic and political weight. And of course, the European dimension is very important for trade. We've seen the FTA signed with India, Australia, Mercosur, so it's a key way to diversify our partners and to actually enhance our economic security. And now I see time is running, so I will end up by focusing on the Japan-French partnership. As you know, we have an exceptional partnership. This is a very specific terminology for our relations since 2013. We've seen a progressive institutionalization of our meetings. There's a 2+2, so defense at the ministerial level, defense and foreign affairs since 2014. And in my view, we actually shifted from relations that was based on mutual fascinations regarding cultural, traditions and economic cooperation to a more strategic partnership. So in this process, the Indo-Pacific has been a springboard for cooperations. We see Japan as a democratic and stable pillar and stable partner in the Indo-Pacific, so that's very, very important. In terms of economy, France is the 5th foreign investor in Japan. Japan is the 10th foreign investor in France. So I've been quite dynamic on this sector. So despite a relationship that's going, as I explained, more strategic, I would like also to underline some kind of confusions or misunderstanding that, in my view, should be clarified to actually advance the partnership. I think the relations is suffering at some point from some misperceptions. And to be very blunt and very simple, I think that Japan sees France as maybe sometimes too distant or too disruptive or too critics, putting too much critics vis-à-vis the US because of its strategic autonomy posture. And France sometimes being a bit too lenient on China or trying to spare China from friction, tensions, and so on. On the other side, I think that France sees Japan sometimes as too much aligned on the US. And too tough on China, and actually maybe putting some pressure on its partners to be tough also on China. So I think we have this kind of misperceptions, but actually in reality, I think that our positions are much closer than we assume. So when you look at France Indo-Pacific strategy, of course, it's not targeting any specific country, but actually it's largely driven by concern over China's rise and regional destabilization risk, and I explained a lot about that. So of course it is in French mind, and you can see French ships going both in the South China Sea, but also in the Taiwan Strait to actually uphold our position. The balancing posture of France, again, does not mean equidistance from China and the US. Actually, the French-US alliance is older and operationally deeper in a way than the US-Japan alliance. We've had a lot of joint combat experience in the latest war, and especially in Africa together. And also I would like to say that finally, like France, Japan is a pragmatic actor. So even within the realm of and keeping the alliance with the US very integrated and very strong, I think that Japan too is seeking to defend its interest and preserving a degree of autonomy, and especially in economic security. So time is running, so I will be very quick on that. But I think that we now experiencing a key turning point in international order with external and internal crisis of the rules-based order that's providing actually a window of opportunity to rethink a more realist, sustainable engagement, building on our strategic autonomy. So that means working together on key critical global value chain, especially in semiconductor and critical minerals. And actually, there is already a project, a joint project regarding rare earth refining plant in southern of France, which is jointly funded by France and Japan. Economic and security and energy security is obviously key, especially what's with the crisis in the Middle East. So we have already a civil nuclear energy cooperation ongoing, which is going to be reinforced. Space issue is also about maintaining capacity to monitor and act autonomously in space and protect our assets. And France and Japan are key partners also to do that. So I'm expecting that President Macron upcoming visit, which is a kind of long overdue, will provide a new dynamic to the relations with new announcement on more cooperation regarding key strategic domains that I explained. And just to add a few words, the upcoming G7 summit in Evian will be also absolutely strategic. Next year, the US will be chairing the summit, so we have a lot of uncertainty. And France is very keen to engage with Japan regarding Indo-Pacific affairs, and also the engagement of external players and partners, including from the global south, to try to rethink the rules-based order together. So I'm sorry, I was a bit long. I will stop here, and I'm looking forward to your comment and questions. Thank you.